What's up, everybody? On today's show, Ole Miss had some experienced O-Linemen through the transfer portal. Kalen DeBoer lands another big recruit at Alabama. And can we crown Lane Kiffin the portal king? Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. Great to have you guys along. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use our code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. All right, in a little bit, we're going to talk with our buddy Stephen Willis, host of Locked On Ole Miss, but kind of doing a tour around the SEC the last couple of days. We've gone to Aggie Land. We've gone out to Austin for the Texas Longhorns as they get ready to come to the SEC. Today, we're doing Ole Miss with our buddy Stephen Willis, so make sure you stick around for that. But we got to hit on all the big headlines going around the SEC today, so let's do it. Let's go around the conference.
Boots out to the right. Takes the handoff. What a catch!
Around the conference.
And we got to start at Ole Miss as they continue to load up on transfers this day, with two big-time O-Linemen that played for Kalen DeBoer coming over from Washington. It was Nate Kalepo and Julius Buelow, two Washington transfers coming to Ole Miss from the Joe Moore award-winning offensive line up there at UW. Buelow played both guard spots at Washington, has one season of eligibility remaining. Kalepo started all 15 games for the Huskies this past year. 14 at left guard. He did make one start at right guard. So big time size on both these guys. They will join Micah Pettis, who's coming back. And Ole Miss bringing a ton of experience back on that O-line. But add these guys to the mix. You know, best offensive line in the country last year. Coming and taking over those two guard spots at Ole Miss. That is going to help. Washington's offense was awesome last year. They gave up just 12 sacks all season on their quarterback, Michael Penix, who threw for 4,900 yards over 15 games. So pretty cool stuff there. We'll talk more on Ole Miss here in a little bit with our buddy Stephen Willis. Over at Alabama, and another day, another big-time recruit. Noah Carter is going to go play for Kalen DeBoer, signed with Washington, play for DeBoer back in December. Of course, DeBoer was hired by Alabama. Carter was released from his national letter of intent with the Huskies, and now he is heading to Alabama, part of their 2024 class. 24/7 Sports has him rated 4 stars, the number 4 player from the state of Arizona, the number 22 edge prospect overall in this group. And again, we'll see what Noah Carter does there for Alabama in the future. But yeah, Kalen DeBoer, knock on him. You know, can he recruit? Well, back-to-back days, adding Ryan Williams, the big 5-star wide receiver, and now an edge in Noah Carter. So we'll see what happens there. One other Alabama note, former defensive lineman Jamil Burroughs leaving the Miami football program after one season. He entered his name in the portal, did not play in a game for Miami in his 1 year over there after transferring over from Alabama. Other happenings over at Florida, Billy Napier and the Gators have announced the date for their orange and blue game. They've played the game on Thursday the last 2 seasons, but this year they're moving it back to Saturday in the Swamp. Billy Napier's team will host their spring game April 13th. They'll kick off at 1 p.m. Eastern that day. Of course, they bring back Graham Mertz at quarterback, but a lot of fans want to see DJ Lagway, big-time quarterback recruit in this recruiting class, 5-star signee, National Player of the Year, according to Gatorade and Max Preps. I had a chance to meet him at the Texas Bowl a couple of weeks ago, and good kid, hoping the best for him in his time there at Florida. But Florida, they're going to bring in a lot of youth, a lot of talent, coming off that 5-7 season and facing a really brutal schedule ahead. They're going to have to lay a foundation very quickly. Oh, and by the way, they lost Trevor Etienne, transferred over to Georgia. So got to figure some things out. Montreal Johnson back in the backfield, but a lot of spots up for grabs there for the Gators heading into this next season. Over at Tennessee, some good news for them as offensive lineman Javontez Spraggins is coming back for another season. He announced on social media he'll be back for 2024. Of course, quarterback Nico Iamaleava looking for somebody to protect him. Spraggins has been there 4 years, considered a senior last year, graduated from UT, but using that COVID year. An 11-game starter at right guard for the Vols last year. So welcome addition back there for Josh Heupel and crew. Over in Kentucky, they are close to reportedly finalizing a deal to bring Eric Wolford back to Lexington to come coach the O-line. Wolford spent the last 2 years coaching at Alabama and following Saban's staff. Of course, a lot of guys were not retained. So not immediately clear what Wolford will do specifically, because they do have a current O-line coach in Zach Yenser, signed a 1-year extension through June of next year. But Wolford coached at Kentucky back in 2021. Before that, he was the O-line coach at South Carolina, coached at Youngstown, San Francisco 49ers. So a lot of experience. A lot of folks critical of that Alabama offensive line last year. So maybe, Eric Wolford, maybe not the hottest name right now, but in his lone season in Kentucky back a couple years ago, took an O-line that needed to replace 3 of their 5 starters and turned it into a Joe Moore Award finalist. Over at Georgia, their hedges are getting a facelift. The school announced that the famous hedges will be revitalized to protect one of college football's greatest traditions. Of course, between the hedges over there at Sanford Stadium, been in place since 1929. The most recent hedges, which were planted, they lasted about 20 to 40 years. They were installed during the 1996 Atlanta Olympics. They were propagated 4 years before that, which gave them a total life of 31 years. Look, I'm not the biggest gardening person, but sounds like a cool deal there for Georgia. The work will include soil replacement, drainage work, irrigation, so on and so forth. The work will be completed by the spring G-Day game. But, looking forward to seeing some fresh hedges there over in Athens next season. Over at Texas A&M, we mentioned named R.C. Slocum, their interim athletic director. The Aggies have completed establishing a 7-member search committee that's going to search for the next AD. Dave Dunlap, class of 1983, is past chair of the 12th Man Foundation. He will chair the search. The Aggies said they hope to identify the next AD within 4 to 6 weeks. Ross Bjork was introduced at Ohio State last week. He will officially join Ohio State on July 1st, but will begin to attend games and tournaments and stuff starting March 1st. Over at Texas, Sark has found his new defensive line coach, according to Matt Zenitz, 24/7 Sports. Miami Dolphins assistant Kenny Baker expected to join Sark's staff and replace the vacancy of Bo Davis, who left for LSU just 2 weeks ago. So Kenny Baker was an assistant D-line coach for the Dolphins last year, has over 10 seasons of college experience, coached at Western Kentucky, was their D-line coach for 2021-2022 before joining the Dolphins. And over at LSU, an interesting story coming out yesterday. Former wide receiver Kayshon Boutte facing charges related to illegal online gaming. Report came out that alleged he used a fraudulent online gambling account. Almost over 8,900 bets made. 17 of those bets based on college football games. 6 involved LSU games when he was playing there. One of the parlays I saw he bet on was the Florida State opener a year ago. He had bet he would go over 80 yards receiving and that LSU would win. Well, neither of those things happened, so didn't say he was successful with his bets, but it's part of an alleged illegal gaming investigation there in Baton Rouge. And so Boutte never bet against himself on the bets, so, Pete Rose action there, but he turned himself in on charges of computer fraud, felony, and misdemeanor count. So we'll see what happens with Kayshon Boutte. Was a member of the New England Patriots this past year as a rookie. And in basketball news, number 1 South Carolina women took down LSU in Pete Maravich Assembly Center on Thursday night, beating number 9 LSU 76-70. It was a close game all the way through, but South Carolina remains undefeated, 18-0, and Dawn Staley's crew takes down Kim Mulkey. It was a great game for those who watched. Very, very entertaining. All right. Thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, we're going to catch up with our buddy Stephen Willis, talk all things Ole Miss. That is coming your way here in just a sec. I want to remind you guys, this episode presented to you by friends over at the Game Time app. It's the fast and easy way for you to buy tickets to all your favorite sporting events. And right now, all users get $100 off when you buy a big game ticket when you use the code Vegas100. Look, they got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time's going to take all the guesswork out of buying tickets. It's the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. Like we said, you can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you get there. The all-in prices show your total up front, so you know you're getting a great deal before you check out. You buy tickets in seconds, just 2 taps on the app. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Right now, all Game Time users get $100 off a big game ticket, wink, wink, with code Vegas100. Again, terms apply. Download the Game Time app and use our code Vegas100 for $100 off a big game ticket. Or if you're not going to the game, use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Rolling along here, Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. And we've been having some fun kind of going around the conference. We've talked A&M. We've talked Texas. Today we talked some Ole Miss with our buddy Stephen Willis, host of course, the Locked On Ole Miss Rebels podcast. It is awesome to talk all things Ole Miss because, man, they have been the talk of the offseason. The portal king, that is Lane Kiffin. But, Stephen, welcome in, man. Good to talk with you. And before we get into the portal and what Ole Miss has done this offseason, I got to rewind. Take us back 2 weeks ago. You hear the news or see the Twitter alert that Nick Saban is retiring. What was your immediate reaction as an Ole Miss guy?
That maybe Lane Kiffin eventually would be able to get over on Alabama a little bit because there was no program that was snake bitten against another program like Ole Miss has been against Alabama over the last, 50 years. I mean, it's a ridiculous amount, but it's a situation to where, I immediately went to, well, somebody's got to be the Ray Perkins in this situation.
Right.
Who's going to be the Ray Perkins that follows this guy? I knew it wasn't going to be Lane. I knew all that, but what was Alabama going to do? And then I got a chuckle and was like, well, the last time Alabama hired a coach from the state of Washington, it got weird. So maybe this could get weird as well. I do not know if Kalen DeBoer is going to frequent gentlemen's establishments in the Mobile area, but I mean, it should be interesting. At least the rest of us have a chance now.
Yeah, that's the overwhelming takeaway is that my buddy Matt Moscona said this. He said, whoever they hire, it doesn't matter who it is. It's not Nick Saban. And it opens the door for everybody. Kalen DeBoer may be awesome at Alabama. He may win titles there, but he won't do it at the clip that Nick Saban just did it. Nick said, you just had the greatest coach of all time go on the greatest run ever and make everybody in the rest of the SEC's life a living hell. And now everybody's got a chance. I told the audience, we were interviewing Eli Drinkwitz at the exact moment when the news came out because we were at the Bear Bryant Awards. And, Eli kind of sat back in his chair a little bit like, it wasn't like a full smile came across his face, but it was a very like, let me digest this. My road just got a little bit easier. I got to think all the coaches kind of had that perspective. One, you'd say, oh, it's one of the greatest of all time, hanging it up. You recognize that importance, but also it doesn't matter who Bama hires. It's not Nick Saban.
Yeah, and also this would, of course, be the year that Ole Miss doesn't play Alabama.
Well, what would have happened there. You guys would have went 10-2, 11-1. Get to the playoff, and then what? In the second round, you face Alabama and you lose, and it's like, God damn, he gets us again. But anyway, you don't have to worry about that. I'm still surprised Harbaugh's leaving. Like, I would think every coach would be like, let's stay in college here. Just the road got a little bit easier with the giant over there in Tuscaloosa hanging it up.
Oh, Jim Harbaugh's on the Pete Carroll plan, basically. He got ran out of the NCAA and into the pros again. And I'm sure Harbaugh's going to be successful, but I mean, let's be real about what's going to happen in Michigan over the next 12 to 24 months. It's going to be daunting. There's going to be real things. And if Jim Harbaugh actually, and I don't know this to be 100% true, but they reported it all over the place, that Harbaugh was trying to have language put in the contract extension saying he can't be fired if the NCAA finds anything. I mean, come on. That's like trying to get immunity ahead of the time for committing the crime. So Michigan, I think, is going to have to pay the piper for their national championship.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see, who becomes. I love what one of the guys at ESPN put out there. He said, "Who's like the face of college football now? Like, who's the villain? Who's the good guy? Who's Lane. It's like, is Lane now the villain? I mean, it's like it becomes okay. Dabo. I think there's a good bit of people who have turned on Dabo here in recent years. I keep saying Kirby's still pretty darn likable because he doesn't talk trash. He doesn't, he just goes about his business. But let Kirby win another title or two, and yes, you'll become the most hated guy in college football because we all hate a winner. Like, you win one, oh, good story. You win a couple, oh my God, we hate you, So just kind of going to be fascinating to see how this evolution goes. But yeah, big faces. Somebody put out a list of all the big name coaches that have left college football in the last decade, and it's like, God, like it's really an end of an era, and opens the door for a lot of coaches like Lane Kiffin now to break through. We years ago I would have laughed in your face if you would have said, "Will Ole Miss ever win a national championship?" But now it is a realistic possibility. And let's get into it, Stephen, as we talk about some of the work that the Portal King has done this offseason. Lane Kiffin going through the SEC and adding a lot of SEC stars. Before we get to that, though, the news this week, they've added 2 O-linemen from the University of Washington, and Nate Kalepo, who played mostly left guard, Julius Buelow, who played mostly right guard, but man, a couple of guards to add some real depth with a lot of experience too. These guys have played a lot of games.
Yeah, and that's 40% of the Joe Moore award-winning offensive line in college football is transferring to Oxford. And after the Georgia game last season, and the real problem, the skill position players have not been Ole Miss's problem for the last 3 or 4 years, honestly. The problem Ole Miss has had is on the lines whenever they face these elite teams. So they need it to get better on there. They need it to get bigger. They need it to look like, honestly, like Georgia does. And Ole Miss answered that on the defensive side of the ball in December when they went and got Walter Nolan and Princely and Monmiel and those guys to line up on the defensive side of the ball. These guys kind of take care of the offensive side of the ball, the interior offensive lineman. I'm interested to see Nate Kalepo got a shout out by the Joe Moore committee that awarded that as kind of the alpha dog of the unit. I'm really excited about that. But you also have Diego Pounds, by the way. A couple of weeks ago, he committed to Ole Miss. He was the left tackle that protected Drake May this past season. And Jerquan Scott, who is the G5 guy that kind of got called up a little bit, who's played 40-something games of football. There's a lot of football that's been played. And I'm pretty excited about what Lane Kiffin is building on the lines. Of course, the skill positions are going to be, they're always going to be what we look at, but the lines are going to be what determines whether or not Ole Miss wins 12 or not.
And some versatility too. Kalepo, he's appeared in 40 games. Last year he played in every game for the national runner-ups. He played in 14 games at left guard, did start 1 game at right guard, allowed just 1 sack. I mean, that's pretty phenomenal. And then Julius Buelow played in 12 games last year, was injured for a few, but he's played both left guard and right guard. So some versatility there, some guys who know how to play the position. I know Micah Pettis had already come out and announced he was coming back for next year. So you start to look at this O-line combined with Jackson Dart and all the weapons coming back, and you really start to look at I look at, Quinshon and go, man, wish it could have worked out because he would have really ate behind this line, but opens the door for Ulysses Bentley and some of these other guys, the Logan Diggs, the LSU running back coming over. And you really just look at all these weapons and say, my God, can Ole Miss's offense be even better this year than it was last year?
Yeah, I think it actually can. Whenever you get rid of a workhorse like Quinshon Judkins, and I don't mean get rid of in a negative sense, I mean just remove that from the books, the shape of the offense can transform a little bit. It can almost be a situation like 2018 to 2019 LSU. Now, I'm not saying that Ole Miss's offense is going to be 2019 LSU. I'm saying the offense can transform and morph that way whenever you're not fixated on 278 carries for Quinshon Judkins, and they can be distributed. Whenever you are going long at about a 65% run clip, and that goes down to about 57%, it can change. And I think Trey Harris is the best wide receiver in football. I think that he has a chance to absolutely break out, and I would have loved to have seen Ole Miss play against Alabama with a healthy Trey Harris, because the first game that he came back was the LSU game, and he just went off from there kind of. But you also have Juice Wells coming in from South Carolina. You have Caden Priestcorn, who in the Peach Bowl had 10 catches and was just unreal. Then you've got the JUCO guys that are going to come in. Deion Smith, the LSU transfer, he went to JUCO. He's finally made it back to major college football after dominating the Mississippi junior college circuit for a year. Marquise Willis, that's a name that everybody should remember as well. He's a JUCO player out of Kahoma Junior College in Mississippi, and that is Malik Willis's brother. Good players. And then you look at Aiden Williams, you look at Caden Lee, a guy that I just named like 6th or 7th in the list. He was forced to play in the Peach Bowl, and Penn State couldn't guard him. The number one defense in the country could not guard him. So these passing weapons with Jackson Dart protect him with the offensive line. I think this offense can look a lot different in 2024.
Yeah, we're going to touch more on some of the offseason additions here as we continue with Stephen Willis of Locked on Ole Miss right after this. More with Stephen Willis in just a second, but I want to remind you guys this episode is presented to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Look, we know the NFL season is coming to a close. We got 2 games left, AFC, NFC championships happening this weekend. And then we got the big one after that. And of course, all that action is up there for you at FanDuel. They are the America's #1 sports book. And right now, new customers, you're going to get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. Go check them out. FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's what's going to get you that special offer. FanDuel.com/lockedon. Get signed up, make your first bet a layup. And once you are signed up, go download their app. Super easy to use. So many different bets to make happen. They got the live same game parlays. You can find new bets in the new Explore tab. Again, super easy to use. You should be checking it out every day and checking out all the action, including all the NFL action happening this weekend. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Get in on the action. It is FanDuel. They are the official partner of the NFL. All right, we dive back into it, talking with our buddy Stephen Willis, talking all things Ole Miss Rebels, and talking about what Lane Kiffin has done in this offseason. I want to touch on a couple of the more recent guys he's added. Trey Amos, transfer from Alabama, came over from Louisiana Lafayette, but I was going back and looking at some of the film on him last year. He played really well in that Alabama secondary as, really like a good cover safety, covering the out of bounds routes at times, covering the middle of the field. I thought he played really, really well. Man, Pete Golding has got some pieces to play with on this defense. I said last year I thought Ole Miss defense may not be very good just because I said, oh, well, they're recruiting well down the road. I like Centurion Perkins, thought maybe Jared Ivey could have a big year, but I was like, they're probably a year away. They were way ahead of schedule, in my opinion. I mean, they played great down the stretch, but now you give Pete Golding weapons. This Ole Miss defense is going to be much, much improved.
Yeah, I like the idea of Trey Amos. And one thing that I really like about it, if you know anything about football in the Southeast and Alabama football, just thinking about that, the secondary is Nick Saban's baby. Nobody goes into those secondary positions that cannot play. Nick Saban wants people to go in there. So whenever you get a transfer from the University of Louisiana Lafayette into Alabama, that guy can probably play. And he does have some extra elite man coverage skills. Ole Miss did a lot of zone defense stuff in year 1 under Pete Golding. I think they want to play a little bit more man with his how dominant that front 7 could end up being, just to kind of lock it up. And it would look a little bit like the Alabamas and the Georgias and the LSUs have done in the past, try to complement them with some tight coverage. But Trey Amos can do that. He can lock you up. After Kool-Aid McKinstry in the SEC championship game got injured, Trey Amos was forced into the duty. He was locked up one-on-one with Brock Bowers and the Georgia wide receivers and held his own. It was the PFF highest graded game of the season for him. I like Trey Amos. I like Amorian Walker, but you didn't ask about him. the transfer from Michigan,
Again,
6'4", another Louisiana kid, combine guy. He's run the 3-cone drill specifically. It's a combine drill. And the fastest time, no NFL time would have been quicker in it. This guy is a freak of an athlete, and you need to let him develop. It's going to take a little bit of time, but he's the guy that could be at the end of this year, into the beginning of next year, somebody to really look out for. He has all the ability in the world.
It's fascinating, the name you touched on a little bit earlier, but getting Walter Nolan. I mean, this guy was the number 1 recruit in the country a couple years ago. Everybody at A&M was excited to see what he can do. He's a force up front, but you have him, you bring in Princely from Florida, you have JJ Pegues coming back. You add Chris Paul to the mix from Arkansas. It's a front 4, front 7, however, you want to break it down. They got some dudes there.
Yeah, and don't forget about TJ Dudley, who got eligible for the Peach Bowl, but he was having to sit out ahead of time. He was the transfer from Clemson, from Alabama, and he's probably going to end up sitting in the middle of the field next to Chris Paul, and you're going to have that front 7 that's going to be like Princely Amonmiela and Walter Nolan, JJ Pegues, and Jared Ivey, because I honestly think Jared Ivey was going to be starting for Ole Miss this year, no matter who they brought in. If Tyler Barron would have stayed at Ole Miss, Jared Ivey would have still started that position because he's just a really, really good football player. But the front 7, Ole Miss on the defensive line, the hand-down defensive line, they can go 8 or 9 deep right now. I mean, talking Xavion Harris and Josh Harris, guys that are 4 stars, really, really highly recruited, highly thought of players. They're sitting here like Xavion Harris could end up being a 3rd-string player as a defensive lineman that this year showed out pretty well. And I just marvel at the amount of depth that Lane Kiffin and Pete Golding have been able to assemble in such a short period of time.
We saw Wesley Walker leaves Tennessee and goes to Louisville, but there were 2 guys, Tamarion McDonald and like you said, Tyler Barron, who were expected to come to Ole Miss, had announced they were transferring to Ole Miss, and then they get flipped to Louisville. What exactly happened there? Is like a former Ole Miss staffer on Louisville staff that flipped that. It's just fascinating that you had several Tennessee guys say they're going to Ole Miss and then in the same offseason flip to Louisville.
Well, you have the situation. I think Tamarion McDonald was the ringleader that committed to Ole Miss. And then you would assume Wesley Walker got into the portal and Ole Miss didn't offer him. And all of a sudden, maybe that had something to do with it. Tyler Barron's little brother got recruited by Louisville. So that probably has something to do with it as well. But Ole Miss, for all the jokes that everybody has about the money flowing around Oxford these days, there's kind of a money ball approach. There's a line that it doesn't matter who you are. If you demand over that line, they let you go. And you saw that with Quinshon Judkins. They just decided, no, the juice isn't worth the squeeze for this. And he ended up at Ohio State, and I hope he has a good year and all of that stuff. But it doesn't matter who you are. They have a monetary evaluation of what you're worth, and you will not go over it. They will not go over that one bit.
It's a fascinating case study too, because we're 2 years removed from, and look, these are the rules we play by now. Nobody's saying, if anybody says, oh, you're buying players. Yeah, that's the point. That's the whole deal. But 2 years ago, we see A&M buy a number 1 recruiting class. And what we came to find out, buying 17 and 18-year-olds, you don't know how good they're going to be. They may have that 5-star next to their name, but we don't know what they can do. What I like about Lane's approach here is he's getting proven guys. We know what Prince Amonmiela is in the SEC. We know what Trey Amos is like. So kind of adding these guys, I think it's fascinating to see how it works out. Now, the one word that has to happen is chemistry. It all has to come together. They have to play well and execute and all that. But I think I kind of like this approach. And if it works, I think you see a lot less teams or schools, collectives, throwing tons of money at 17-year-old recruits as opposed to go get the proven guys from other schools that have already been there, done that.
Yeah, if Ole Miss does this and it works out, and let's say Ole Miss hosts a playoff game and all of that stuff happens, everybody's going to copy it. And I'm not going to say it's going to be the death of high school recruiting. I think it's going to be the death of high-profile high school recruiting. Because what you have right now is G5 schools and even other places within the conference, there's kind of a hierarchy that's built up. And the whole goal is to get from down here to up here. And however you do it, it might not be linear or the same thing for every player, but you can find a way to work up to the top. And I think that's what you're seeing right now. Like Jerquan Scott, the interior offensive lineman, come to Ole Miss from Southern Mississippi. It's a situation where I can almost just refer to it as Jerquan Scott got called up, because that's what it is. He wanted to prove himself in his last year of college, get some NFL tape, get all of that stuff on the interior of the offensive line, probably make a little bit of money as well, and get ready for the next level and the next stage of his life. Now, the other benefit that Ole Miss has that some schools are having right now is this is about to the end of it, but the COVID year is about to go away. Ole Miss and Mississippi State in baseball got a national championship out of the COVID year, essentially. Now, what's going to happen on the football side, this is still going, and now you look at Ole Miss's transfer portal class and what's going on, I think that extra COVID year is helping as well when it comes to depth while we're reorganizing in college football right now.
Just a couple more for you. You're talking with our buddy Stephen Willis, all things Ole Miss Rebels. What'd you make of the Jeff Lebby hire? I don't think I've talked with you since Mississippi State hired him. Does it make you nervous? Is it you not care? What do you make of what the Bulldogs did?
I think it's a good hire for them. I think he'll do a good job there. I don't think you have to worry about Jeff Lebby job shopping all the time. And that's not because he's a bad coach. I'm just talking about the Browl stuff that's always going to follow him around for better or for worse. He's going to recruit really hard. There's a lot of connections in that fan base. But in the end, what you just hired was Lane Kiffin light, less than Lane Kiffin. It was like diet Lane Kiffin. That's what you got with Jeff Lebby. It's going to be fine. It's probably what Mississippi State needs. But at the end of the day, when you look at it, it's kind of an interesting little brother type situation to where you're trying to copy what's happening up the road, because it is kind of working up the road. So I get it, but yeah, I'm not really afraid of Jeff Lebby. I'm not worried about it. I think they have a long way to go in their NIL collective before you can even get nervous about anybody that's coaching in Starkville right now.
Yeah, I wouldn't say, here's the problem is if Jeff Lebby goes there and has 2 really good years at Mississippi State, he's going to get poached. And it's not to say Mississippi State's a stepping stone job, but it just feels like one of those situations that if somebody big comes calling that, they're going to pull him out of there. Whereas, where I think if Mike Leach, rest in peace, if he doesn't pass, Mike Leach is just, he would have stayed at Mississippi State another 5-7 years, kept doing his thing, beating some teams. With Saban gone, he, maybe would have been more of a factor and a problem in the conference. But no, it'll be very interesting to track that. Last thing for you, we are about to get into spring conversation, spring ball, spring workouts, all that kind of stuff. What's the biggest question mark to you for the Ole Miss Rebels as they look towards spring ball?
Running back, honestly. That's what I'm going to be paying attention to for Ole Miss, with Quinshon Judkins being out of the room. Obviously, you're going to protect Ulysses Bentley. You know what you have with him, but it's going to be a big major spring for Kedrick Riscano. I want to see exactly what he does. I want to see what's going on. And also I want to see if somebody besides the starting center can be a good center, because every time a center's gone down, they've had to rearrange like 3 or 4 spots in the offensive line. And as we saw against Georgia last year, that's not a good recipe against elite teams.
Yeah, kind of one of the quiet stories was Logan Diggs playing the bowl game for LSU and got hurt. There's no talk of timetable on when he's going to be ready. In fact, I wouldn't say, he may not be ready for the start of spring. We'll see how it goes, but
I think he's a playoff get. They got him to be ready for the playoffs.
Wow. Well, we'll see what the timeline is on his injury, but certainly very productive back at Notre Dame. It was very good for LSU this year when he was out there. So we'll see. Steven, always good to catch up with you, man. Always fun to talk Ole Miss Rebels. And man, I got a feeling we're going to be talking a lot more about the Ole Miss Rebels this year in the SEC. Thanks for the time, man.
Yeah, and congrats on 5,000 subscribers. That's big time.
Yeah, shout out to everybody following us. Follow Steven. You make us your first listen every day. Go make Locked On Ole Miss your second listen every day. Check out Stephen Willis covering all things Ole Miss. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On SEC. We will talk to you guys on Monday right here on Locked On SEC.